Someone, somewhere, thousands of years ago, walked into total darkness and started painting monsters. Not cute bison or noble lion's things with too many limbs, twisted faces, and shapes that look like they came out of a fever dream. Why? That's what's been haunting archaeologists for decades. Because these weren't just doodles on stone, they were warnings, secrets, or maybe stories we were never meant to understand. I've always been fascinated by cave art. There's something primal about it. It's not curated or polished, it's raw, untouched by trends or rules. The beasts drawn in the caves of Rukari seem like they're lunging straight at you, mouths open mid-roar, claws frozen just before impact. Others don't even make sense. Spirals, crisscrossed lines. Shapes that feel like they mean something, but no one alive knows what. And then there are the handprints, ghostly palms slapped on stone as if to say, I was here, I lived, I mattered. But these aren't just prehistoric sketches. They're ancient signals. Messages carved into rock by minds long gone. Through them, we glimpse a flicker of how early humans saw the world, what thrilled them, what fed them, and what terrified them. Because a surprising amount of this ancient art isn't about animals or survival, it's about death. And not just death, brutal death. Speared figures, bodies collapsed. Violence immortalized in red ochre and burnt charcoal. So what were these drawings trying to say? Were they warnings passed down across generations? A kind of visual storytelling? Or were they memories? Today, we're peeling back the first layers of the oldest art humans ever made, and what it might tell us about a world where fear wasn't just a feeling, it was a way of life. But our journey doesn't begin in the famous caves of Lascaux or Altamira. We're starting somewhere older, wilder, south of everything. In a place called Malanga Cave, perched near the southern edge of Africa. It's here that researchers unearthed the earliest known sparks of symbolic thought among Homo sapiens. Shards of ochre scratched with repeating lines, carved more than 70,000 years ago. Shells pierced for threading, likely worn as necklaces, bones shaped into pigment tools, and abalone shells used like mixing bowls for early paint. They weren't just surviving, they were thinking in symbols. And it gets even weirder, because Homo sapiens weren't the only ones doing this. Deep in Spain, inside the shadowy tunnels of Las Perdas, Ardanto, and Monte Cresa, archaeologists found symbols dots, zigzags, primitive signs dated to 64,000 years ago. That's over 20,000 years before humans even stepped foot in Europe, which means someone else painted them, most likely Neanderthals, and that changes everything. The urge to create wasn't just ours, it was something older, something shared. As that creative spark spread, it ignited something massive. Cave art started appearing everywhere. In Sulawesi, Indonesia, we see outlines of human hands and wild pigs on stone from 45,000 years ago. In Borneo, bulls and longhorns from nearly the same era. Australia's Kimberley region holds cave art that's been dated back 40,000 years. But regardless of where it pops up, there's one recurring theme. Animals. Always animals. Giant elk. Saber-toothed cats. Mammoths lumbering through the dark. Etched and painted with jaw-dropping detail. But here's the twistaments almost never show up. Despite being visual creatures, despite children today drawing stick figures before they can spell their names, our ancient ancestors rarely drew themselves. And when they did, it wasn't flattering. Twisted bodies, bloody wounds, figures collapsed on the ground. Why? There's an old theory in anthropology, the peaceful primitive. The idea that early humans lived in balance with nature, free from war, greed, and violence. It's a comforting thought. I used to believe it too. I've spent hours staring at Ice Age cave murals made by the Morvik, Dorgal, and Karzian peoples groups whose art bursts with grace. Herds of gazelles mid-gallop. Wolves slinking through frozen forests. It's easy to fall under the spell of it all. There's a haunting beauty to it. A kind of nostalgic ache, like looking into a time when everything was simpler. But then you look closer, stay just a little longer, and that dream begins to crack, because sometimes, tucked between all the majestic beasts, is something else. Something much harder to ignore. A human, sprawled out, pierced with spears. Take Keshmel Cave in southern France. Famous for its spotted horse's beautiful creatures, rendered in such precision that modern DNA analysis suggests the patterns are real. But go a bit deeper, past the horses, beyond the swirl marks, and you'll find something that doesn't fit. A figure, roughly drawn, lines jagged and urgent, but unmistakable. A person laid flat, limbs stretched and stabbed. The figure on the cave wall is riddled with something sharpstone-tipped spears or carved bone blades, depending on who you ask. Some researchers count 5 weapons jammed into the body, others see 10. It's not subtle. It looks deliberate, calculated. Just a few feet away is a strange geometric symbol-clean lines forming a wide, symmetrical shape. Some say it looks like a bird. Others argue it's a kind of tribal badge, maybe even a warning. But to me, it looks like something far more instinctive, a stance. Arms out, legs braced. Not passive, not fearful, defiant, dominant, almost daring. It reminded me of that infamous footage from the Naraka Islands where, when approached by outsiders, the locals didn't flee. They widened their posture, raised their weapons, and stared the intruders down. Pure dominance, no translation needed. Could this symbol on the cave wall be echoing that same posture? Was it the killer? A clan warning? A message carved in blood. Step closer, and this is what happens to you. No one can say for sure, but the same mark has been found in at least 3 nearby caves. Maybe it wasn't just graffiti. Maybe it was a signature, a symbol of power, and maybe violence. Just over the ridge lies Arvu Cavern, another ancient tunnel web tucked into France's chalky terrain. Among the usual suspexrid deer, boar, and long-horned beasts, something darker appears. 2 humans, not heroic, not triumphant. One figure is crouched inside the outline of a towering elk, probably a megaceros, but your eyes go straight to the pose. He's bent, twisted, with 3 spears jutting from his back. He's not hunting, he's running, or was, frozen at the moment the weapons hit. The second figure is worse. The posture is clear sprawled flat, arms and legs extended, a classic depiction of death. But it's not the position that grabs you, it's the sheer number of wounds. This guy isn't just dead, he's obliterated. Spears pierce his limbs, his chest, even the sides of his body. It doesn't feel random. It feels almost ritualistic. Like someone wanted this to be remembered. Not just that someone died, but that they were killed and how. Which raises the question, why paint this? Why preserve a murder in charcoal and blood-red pigment? What kind of reality did these artists live in that moments like this were important enough to etch into stone? The Ice Age has always been a kind of Rorschach test. Some imagine it as a time of brutal, constant struggle. Others see it as peaceful, tribal cooperation under the stars. But when you start actually looking at the numbers, the picture gets more complicated. Around 37,000 years ago peak, Upper Paleolithic Europe likely had fewer than 4,000 Homo sapiens across the entire continent. That's fewer people than you'd find in a single high school football stadium, spread out over millions of square kilometers. Population density? About 3 humans per 100 square kilometers. For reference, modern Mongolia famously empty platias, around 200 per 100 square kilometers. So yeah, the Paleolithic wasn't exactly crowded. Most humans back then lived in mobile bands of 15 to 30 people. Half of them were probably kids. These weren't armies. These were survival pods, flexible, tight-knit, and totally reliant on one another. So, were massive tribal wars likely? Not really, but personal violence? Definitely on the table. Even in sparse populations, humans will find ways to fight. Over food, over trust. over who stole whose elk ribs, and sometimes those fights turn into blood feuds. To piece together how prehistoric violence worked, anthropologists often study modern hunter-gatherers. One famous study analyzed 21 such societies spread across the globe, looking specifically at incidents of lethal violence. The results? Brutally human. About 55% of killings were personal, one-on-one, emotional. The kind of thing that starts with a stare and ends with a rock. Another 36% happened within the same group, often between relatives or people who knew each other well. Only 15% involved separate groups, and even then, it wasn't usually about land or food. The real sparks were ego-driven. Insults, status, cheating, shame. You know, classic human drama, just with spears instead of tweets. Another detail that stood out: most of the killings weren't random. They were premeditated, and many were remembered. Stories passed down, names carved into memory, maybe even into cave walls. So yes, those stylized figures pinned to stone might be more than symbols. They might be eyewitness accounts, murder scenes turned myth. You'd expect that early humans, fighting for survival every day, would have had bigger things to worry about than recording their worst moments on stone. But the fact that some of them still took the time to carve or paint scenes of death-specific personal death tells us something. Violence wasn't just noise in the background. It meant something. It stuck. And sometimes it made it onto the cave walls. So why document it all? Why, in the back of some pitch-black tunnel, sketch a dying man instead of a majestic elk? There are a few theories. Maybe it was real. A murder. An execution. The kind of thing a group wouldn't want to forget. Or maybe it was a warning. A cave painting version of, "Don't break the rules." Early human societies weren't as lawless as we imagine. They were bound by customs, taboos, and sometimes the penalty for breaking those rules wasn't just exilite, was a spear through the ribs. But there's another possibility. Maybe these weren't actual people at all. Maybe they were characters, villains from tribal stories, symbols of shame or betrayal, punished not by other humans but by spirits or gods. And maybe painting these scenes of violence wasn't just storytelling. Maybe it was ritual, a way to remember, or to warn, or to ask forgiveness. Whatever the reason, one thing's clear. These weren't careless scribbles. These figures were crafted deliberately, painstakingly, with meaning. Because this wasn't just art, it was memory. And the story doesn't stop there. Elsewhere in Ice Age art, wounded humans appear again, but not from human violence. This time, the threat comes from animals. These scenes add a new, brutal layer to the story. Because in the Paleolithic, humans weren't always the ones doing the hunting. Sometimes, they were the hunted. One of the strangest panels in Ice Age art lies hidden deep in the tunnels of the Drakash Cave complex. It's known simply as the pit scene, and it's baffled archaeologists for decades. Nothing else in the cave looks quite like it. A massive buffalo dominates the space, its stomach torn wide open, organs spilling out in such detailed strokes it could pass for a biology diagram. Lying before it is a human figure. Arms flung wide, legs awkward. The head is odd, bird-like, either masked or transformity. Either way, it's unsettling. And then there's the stick. A vertical rod rises from the floor near the figure, topped with a bird. It feels almost theatrical, like a play frozen in time. Interpretations are all over the place. Some call it a Vijona shaman's trance, where man becomes animal and vice versa. But I think it's something far more grounded. A failed hunt, the bird on the stick? Probably a spear thrower. A spear's visible in the buffalo's belly, though a gut wound wouldn't have killed it fast. So maybe the hunter struck too low. The animal turned, charged, and crushed him. That's just one version of the story. Truth is, No one knows. Ice Age art is weirdly abstract, full of symbols we don't understand, which is part of why it's so unsettling. You're not supposed to fully get it. You're supposed to feel like you're missing something, because you are. But let me throw it to you, what do you think's happening here? The comments are open. Then there's the scene at Brolosif. I'm butchering the pronunciation. Blame my French. This time, the story isn't painted. It's carved, a relief in stone. You see a human mid-motion, almost running. Right behind him, a massive beast, likely a bison, maybe an aurochs. The thing's in a full charge, head down, shoulders low, coming in hard. The person? Arms up, leaning away. It's a moment frozen in tension, either just before the hitter, just after the narrowest escape. And the way the stone captures that tension, that unspoken energy, it's almost cinematic. Some experts think it's metaphorical, a symbol of fear, a spiritual chase. Others think it's brutally literal, a memory. One bad day on the tundra carved into rock. Because if there's one thing this Ice Age art makes clear, it's that early humans had stories to tell. Some were about glory, some about gods, but some were warnings, carved in darkness, painted in blood, and left for someone else, someone like us to one day find and try to understand. In that carved moment, the hunter becomes the punchline. It's one of the rare glimpses into Ice Age life where failure isn't just tragic, it's borderline hilarious. The guy's got this awkward crouch, limbs flying, expression frozen like he just realized his spear bounced off a charging beast. It's tragic, but also kind of meme-worthy. That same vibe you get from a viral video freeze frame seconds before disaster. But the deeper you go, the stranger things get. Inside the cave system of Kalbura, there's one of the most disturbing hybrid figures ever scratched into prehistoric stone. It's got the heavy, hulking frame of a bison, but the arms and torso, human. The head is weird, not fully beast, not fully man. It might be wearing horns, or a mask. Or maybe it's something worse, in between. What really catches the eye isn't the form, it's the posture. Twisted, in pain. Deep incisions suggest wounds like it's writhing. Some researchers think this could be a shaman mid-transformation. A human channeling the essence of an animal during some dark, ceremonial trance. Or maybe it's more symbolic. A fusion of predator and prey. A warning about the blurred line between hunter and hunted. I've always leaned toward the bison shaman theory, especially knowing that thousands of years later, far across the world, indigenous cultures of North America performed ceremonies in bison garb hoods, hides, entire animal skins. It's probably just a coincidence, but it's eerie how two completely separate cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, could arrive at such a similar vision. Man becoming beast to make sense of nature. And that's the thing. The scenes from Drakash, Rocktel, and Kalbura aren't as direct as the bloodied figures from places like Keshmel or Arvu. They feel different. Less like news reports, more like legends. These aren't snapshots of real events, they're something foggier. They exist somewhere between memory and myth. We don't know who these strange figures were meant to be. Maybe they weren't people at all. Maybe they were ghosts, or gods, or just names spoken in stories that no one's told in 30,000 years. Because Ice Age culture wasn't simple. It was rich, full of symbols, rituals, beliefs just like ancient Greece, or Egypt, or Mesopotamia. The difference? Their myths didn't survive in books, only in scratches and paint. So when we see a man with the head of a bird, or a dying hunter mid-charge, or a bison who might be part human, we're not just seeing history, we're seeing belief, something deeply spiritual. And in those beliefs, violence wasn't just danger, it meant something. Maybe power, maybe punishment, maybe transformation. Today, we look at cave art and marvel at its beauty. The detail, the craftsmanship. But behind those elegant horses and charging mammoths is something less comfortable. Pain, death, and fear. These artists weren't painting for likes. They were survivors, storytellers, people trying to explain why the world was so terrifying and why sometimes you didn't come back from the hunt. And maybe that's why, after 30,000 years, these images still hit hard, because deep down, we get it. We recognize the fear, the risk, the absurdity of life spiraling out of control in one wrong moment. Every mark on those walls, it wasn't just art. It was someone's way of saying, I'm here, I saw things, I want you to know. So, if you made it this far, you're in the circle now. Consider yourself part of the tribe. Drop a comment. Tell me which Ice Age figure you found the most haunting or the most ridiculous. Do you think these scenes are history? Or mythology? Or some blend of both? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story from the shadows.